Hello, welcome. Actually, it was introduced. So we are here to talk about impact strategies around building women's financial resilience. I'm joined by three great speakers. I'm not going to introduce who they are and where they're from. They can do that better than I can. And so hopefully we'll go away from just my head and we'll have four heads up on the screen very quickly. As Celia kind of touched on, we need to look at more about the how, and actually that's what we're going to talk about, how investors are measuring and managing impact at scale, moving beyond that counting numbers of women and towards understanding and achieving intended outcomes and impacts. We've got 60 minutes. We'd like this to be as interactive as possible. We'll try and do that between the four of us. And also we'd really like to hear from you in the audience. So as soon as you've got a question, as soon as we said something you don't know, as soon as we said something you disagree with, send something through. Like, please try and make it as interactive as possible. This is the end of the day for me, beginning of the day for you. So yeah, let's try and keep the energy going as we go through. We've got some sort of quick fire rounds that we're going to discuss before opening up to some broader Q&A in the next sort of 59 minutes. So to start with, I'll turn to everyone, but first to Antonia and then to Polly. Can you briefly explain what it is that you do and therefore really what financial resilience means in the context of your organization's work? And tied to that, really, what is the outcome or the impact that you want to see scaled? So if we can just understand across three different organizations what it is you're trying to do.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you everyone for joining this session. And I'd like to thank Kiva for the opportunity to contribute to this conversation as well as learn from it. My name is Antonia and I work with GEFI. So GEFI, what we are about is empowering entrepreneurs to thrive. And by thriving, we mean operating profitable businesses. And how we do this is we equip the franchisees with assets and other capital that they need, as well as training to provide affordable access to basic needs like safe drinking water and LPG to their communities. And we deploy a social franchise business model to achieve our mission. What this means for women's financial resilience is, for us, really, it's more money in the franchisees' pockets. Yeah, the way our business model works is along the franchise growth journey, we set targets for revenue, controlling for expenses, and to hit certain profitability milestones. So we have teams that support the entrepreneur to coach them, train, shadow at successful franchises so that they can learn and hit these milestones. And so for us, financial resilience is really built into how well and how fast a franchisee hits their set targets. More volumes for LPG, more volumes for water equals higher profit, which is more money in the franchisee's pocket. And the outcome we want to see scaled, I know we are not talking about numbers, but for us, it is more women in the franchise network, because we know at certain volumes they take home net profit of $10,000 per annum, 20, even up to 40,000. So we want to see more women in the network, because at the moment, for every 10 applications, only 3 are women. Yeah, so we want to understand that further. Why is it that women are not applying to take up these entrepreneurship opportunities? And what can we do? What do we need to tweak in our application process? Because when we look at the challenges, why do women maybe fail in their businesses? Things like access to capital, experience. We are not so strict on any of those, because we do the training, we provide interest-free loans, so there's no need for them to go to the banks where they probably want to be given access to the credit. And so, yeah, recruitment pipeline, how do we get more women into the network? Because we know we can support them to succeed when they do. Thank you.
Antonia, can I just pass straight to Polly?
Sure, thanks, Dan. Thanks. I wanted to take a minute to thank USAID and Kiva for convening this conference. We're so happy to be here. My name is Polly Kalekis. I'm the COO of the SPBD Microfinance Network. SPBD is the South Pacific Business Development Microfinance Network, and we're a network of microfinance institutions in 5 countries in the South Pacific. We are in Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, the Solomon Islands, and in Vanuatu. We launched our first program in 2000 in the country of Samoa, and today we have 175 staff that work across 19 branches, serving 50,000 active members, 50% of whom are actually active credit clients. Since inception, we've dispersed loans totaling more than 200 million US dollars, and we really focus on a part of the world where we do see underserved and unserved populations. And for many of our members, we were the first microfinance institution they've worked with. So we feel we're really pushing the boundary of financial inclusion in geographies where it, is quite lacking until we were able to get there. So currently, I serve as a COO, as I mentioned. I'm based out of our head office, and some of my responsibilities include our operational priorities, upgrading our policies and processes, new product development and process development, social performance management and impact measurement, corporate governance, partnerships. So, there's a lot going on. And then to get right into your initial question, what do we do? So I gave you a little bit of information on who we are. What we do actually is we work to improve the lives of underprivileged families. And we do this by providing them with meaningful economic opportunity. We are actually especially focused on empowering women to start, grow, and maintain micro businesses, and hopefully grow them to SME businesses. And also to do this, we do provide a suite, what we like to call a suite of products and services. And these include, of course, various credit products, savings accounts. I think the previous panel really noted the importance of savings, especially to promote financial resilience. We offer death benefits, digital financial services. We also actually focus on financial education and business skills training for members, recognizing that providing additional capacity and know-how on how to better use your money and how to budget is super important. And then a few other services. So that's in a nutshell some of the products and services we offer. And then turning to your question about, what is financial resilience for SPBD? Well, for us, it's the ability for our members to weather, the proverbial storm and really to use our products and services effectively so that they can be financially resilient and get through these tough challenges. I think for us, what we've seen is, we've got challenges at an individual level for some of our members. This, for example, could be the death of an income earner in their household, or what we're seeing currently, impacts at a broader societal level. So business disruption caused by various external factors, such as COVID. We've seen various lockdowns across our markets, which really significantly impact our members' ability to even, operate their business. And also natural disasters, volcanic eruptions and tsunamis most recently. So, weathering these types of storms is critical, right, to get our members back on their feet. And we feel that our products and services are really actually quite helpful in supporting their financial resilience. And in terms of the examples I'll cite, when you have credit products, right, to start and grow an income generating business while you're generating income for your family. Higher income can translate into improved financial resilience. Savings accounts, and again, not to harp on the importance of savings, but really, if you've got that savings cushion, then that will help you meet unexpected expenses, right, or weather some of these shocks that we're actually currently seeing. The death benefits payouts program that we offer also helps our members, with becoming more or enabling them to be resilient in the event of death of a member or her spouse. And so, we do have data that shows, especially, important to helping our members manage through this COVID period is the importance of savings. And members were actually relied on their savings to deal with the negative income effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I guess the other things I would like to say, the outcomes, you mentioned what outcomes we would like to scale. For us, we are looking to ensure that our work is having a positive impact on our members and on their households. We look at members' quality of life improvements, household welfare improvements, and we are, really also targeting things like housing improvements. How are our members' housing conditions improving over time? Household assets and asset ownership. This could be appliances or technologies or transport. So how is the asset, how are our members' assets changing over time? Are they investing in assets? Are they productive assets? Investing in childhood education, that's also important to us as an organization. And tracking whether our members are keeping their school-aged children in school. And of course, increasing savings is very important.
Thanks, Polly. So I was writing some notes, there's quite a bit. You started off actually quite similar, basically, in terms of money in the pocket, successful businesses, and then things like access to finance, access to financial services, access to financial knowledge, but then shifted to a further part about looking at outcomes and impacts around actually what that meant for the people in the home, and looking into a kind of another level of granularity and another level of detail behind that. Tara, and I think you sit in a slightly different space again. So what can you bring to that discussion about what it is that you're up to?
USAID, pleasure to be here. I'll try and buzz through this pretty quickly so we can get into dialogue. My name is Tara Murphy-Ford. I'm the Managing Director of Capital and Impact at Global Partnerships. Global Partnerships is an impact-first fund manager dedicated to expanding opportunity for people living in poverty. We were founded in 1994 and have been managing funds since 2005. We're currently managing 5 funds. 4 of those are growth stage fixed income funds, 1 early stage social venture fund. All our funds are directed at our mission. They're investing in social enterprises that are addressing the various needs of households living in poverty in Latin America, the Caribbean, and sub-Saharan Africa. So the social enterprises that we're investing in are providing basic goods and services to households of individuals living under 550 and oftentimes 320 per person per day. We currently have a portfolio of about 130 million across those active funds. It's invested in over 80 partners in about 28 countries at this point in time. I'm going to zone in. We invest with specific initiatives. You can think of that as almost a theory of change. And we have 14 different active initiatives, from solar to smallholder farmer market access. But 33 of our partners right now are within our women-centered finance with education and women-centered finance with health initiatives. And for the purposes of this conversation, our theory of change within those initiatives is that we're investing in financial service providers that are scaling outreach to female micro entrepreneurs living under 550 or 320 per person per day, providing much of what Polly noted, which is not only access to critical financial services, productive use loans alongside access to savings, but also important access to information that's needed in order to make good use of that opportunity. And we do that with the hope that we're building economic resilience and women's empowerment. And we see some key drivers of that when we think about outcomes. We're thinking about the role of women's role in the household and how is that evolving from an empowerment perspective. But those critical pieces of income and consumption smoothing to build resilience in the event of a financial shock. So we're looking at ability to earn an income, an ability to save, an ability to plan your finances. And how is that impacting your quality of life? We think of that as kind of the impacts for women. But we also think about a set of outcomes or impacts for the household, which is based on how women choose to reinvest that increased economic resilience. Yeah, how is household education spend evolving, food security, home improvements, ability to see a doctor. So we're really looking at kind of through that provision of basic goods and services, how is the quality of life and economic resilience, as well as the well-being of the household evolving. So I'll stop there so we can dive in. But I think, in terms of sitting on this panel, it's really great to be alongside Antonia and Polly, who are doing kind of the direct provision. And then we are sitting more from a vantage point of an impact first investor who's working with a portfolio of partners who are aligned in terms of the types of outcomes that they're looking to achieve.
Thanks. We used a phrase that we used before about the long screwdrivers as well. And what's interesting now is that you can only sort of own a lot of the time looking down into your own ecosystem. So for now, you're looking all the way from that very end. In the panel before, they were talking about the use of your individual money, etc. So then it comes to that individual who then goes to effectively an asset manager that then goes down the line to the very end of that. So I think it's interesting to see how looking at those theories of change and where the outcomes and the impacts are stretched depending on your point of view and where they sort of happen. If in terms of one of the conversations we had when thinking about this was around the challenges. So what are the common challenges that are aware of regarding the measurement of impact in this area? Now, aware that we're stretching that discussion across all of it. I'm going to go straight back to Tara on this one in terms of what you would see as, if you could think of the common challenges, taking that helicopter view from on the ground through to the role that you have at the moment, and then we'll get additional issues that come in from Polly and Antonia.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that. I think that as a starting point, particularly from where we sit in the ecosystem as an asset allocator, we're looking to align with asset owners as well as practitioners around a clear thesis of who are we looking to serve and how are we hoping to enable outcomes. And so I think one challenge first and foremost is just clarity of what are the outcomes that we're looking to enable and for whom. And I think that getting to that clarity and finding aligned partnerships to say, okay, and if this works, what is it that we're going to be enabling? So I think clarity is an important piece of it, and being able to articulate that theory of change and then aligning around what measurement is going to occur and to what end. So what data is needed by whom and at what point of time, or at what point in time in order to make informed decisions, be that as a business manager in Antonia's seat, or as a network manager in Polly's seat, or as an investor trying to deploy capital towards the most impactful solutions, or as an asset owner trying to choose which funds you're going to be investing in. So aligning around the purpose, the why, aligning around the metrics. And then I think there are particular challenges in terms of the methods that have been used to date being extremely costly, extremely time intensive, making it very difficult to scale. But if we don't start with an aligned purpose and we don't have a clear sense of what we're going to be measuring, those challenges become that much more amplified, because now you've spent a bunch of time and a bunch of resources gathering data that may not be answering the key question for the direct practitioner, the investor, or the asset owner.
Great, so quite a bit there. Starting with that aligning piece, and then I think the cost of it to end up in something that doesn't work for everybody, or at worst doesn't work for anybody. Antonia and Polly, please just jump straight in if you've got any other ones for your specific area as well, where you see those challenges.
Yeah, so Tara talked about the costs, purpose, clarity, which all apply. And if we are to deploy resources, where do we see more impact? So for example, in our situation, do we invest in the proxies, like more money in entrepreneurs' pockets, or do we do the deep dive? Because from what all the indicators, the impact indicators Polly mentioned, for example, yes, female entrepreneur will have more money, but are they saving? Do they have the financial education? How has it impacted the quality of health, ownership of assets? And we see some of these. We hear the stories around, one of our franchises, for example, a female franchisee just bought a brand new Audi And we know 5 years ago when they came into the network, they didn't even have a car. Another one, she told us she lost a child going to because she went to public hospital. She's since she's since been able to afford a private hospitals, had 3 healthy children, paid tuition for her, like 3 sisters. So we hear the stories, but I mean, we need to be able to measure that quantitatively over time. But we don't have capacity in-house. We need a full-time person to be able to do that. We once had one such resource, but it was a grant. When we exhausted the grant, we couldn't afford the resource anymore. So it's opportunity cost, with the resources that we have, where do we invest? And for us, we've decided to just go for the bare minimum and use proxies for some of those other indicators, but would want to do much deep dive into all the indicators that Polly mentioned to be able to speak with certainty around the impacts that we are making.
Yeah, and I guess to sort of, echo, of course, the cost of conducting some of these measurement exercises. But I would say, just thinking a little bit more about the complexities involved, and what's been, insightful for us has been sort of the devil's in the detail. And, you can come up with a very nice overview, methodology, and then you start to really dive into the different tasks associated with creating a survey, data capture, data analysis. And so, there are lots of different pieces that once you really start getting into the nitty-gritty, pose new challenges that maybe you didn't anticipate early on, or so I would say that the complexity of the different stages of rolling out an impact measurement system shouldn't be understated. So, there are ways to go, like using the proxies, as Antonia mentioned, is certainly one way. We are actually looking at developing a more in-depth survey to measure, the housing impacts that we're hoping to see or that we expect to see in our members. But let's see, what are some of the other challenges? Certainly the staff capacity to be able to do this is important. We don't have, a full-time impact measurement team, and we don't have a full-time individual in our MFIs solely focused on impact. And then there's the capacity and the expertise that we really are looking for external partners to help us with. So finding the external partners actually is also one of the challenges, to enable us to really create the instruments, the methodologies that are rigorous, that our investors might want to see, and that we can, bake into our operations, as we like to say. So I think those are some of the additional challenges that I would say we've faced as we've been, going along our journey of impact measurement.
Great, thanks. Guys, obviously, it's really interesting around the proxies there, because I was kind of scribbling something that said, are proxies good enough? So, well, yes, if everybody on the investment chain agrees they're good enough. And it comes back to Tara's point there about the clarity, and saying, there's a massive challenge around everybody agreeing that this is what you're looking at, and that is good enough for what you're trying to do and what you're trying to say and achieve. Which, okay, so we understand there's loads of challenges. If anyone else has got, from your perspective in the audience, about the challenges you're finding on this, then please bung them in the chat, and it's something we can kind of maybe address as we go through. So if we're on the, sorry, Tara, come in, please.
And I was just going to mention that maybe this will bridge into your next point, but I think this conversation of proxies also raises an important piece, which is how do we create iterative and adaptive systems for impact management? Because ideally, we're getting closer. This is not a game of certainty. This is a game of confidence, right? Where we're using various data sets to increase our interval of confidence that we are in fact reaching who we aim to serve and their lives are improving. And that data is going to be both quantitative and qualitative. It's going to be contextual as well as output, as well as outcome. Some of those output data points are going to be proxies, right? Loan size, it's correlated with poverty, but it's not a perfect measure, right? And so we need to be testing into our confidence in the proxies. So I don't think it's a black and white question of are proxies good enough? The question is, what is our confidence in the proxy and what are we doing to increase that confidence over time? Or if we learn that proxy is not a strong proxy over time, how do we move to a different set of data or lean less heavily on it? So I would say over time, we've been using different pieces of data, contextual data. How's the loan structured? Then actual poverty outreach data to test into, is the loan size in this context, in this organization, an appropriate proxy for poverty outreach, right? So the question is, are we getting smarter in our use of proxies? And I'm curious, I think as we bridge maybe into a conversation too around like how do we continue to learn and improve? I think sometimes the challenge is we spend a bunch of resources, time, energy, money creating a system, but the system is very fixed. So how do we continue to learn and adapt?
That adaptability piece is really interesting. We're like, no, okay, we've got something that we think works, and how do we not get stuck doing the same thing for the last 10 years? Or alternatively, not ended up there. We tried that 10 years ago and it didn't work then. So we're going to assume nothing's changed, like technology in the intervening period, and having that flexibility. Okay, so circling back to the sort of how investors are measuring, there's part of the thing which is actually, why is impact measurement important for scaling up positive outcomes? So to some degree, impact reporting, it can be a one-way channel. You're just reporting stuff back up the chain. Does it actually change what you're doing on the ground? Does it change what you're actually achieving? So beyond the soundbite of what's measured gets managed and those kind of things, what really is the benefit of measuring impact you see from your different works? Is it something that enables you to report back to investors or donors and actually then achieve more money in that lens? Or is it actually of practical use in your strategy and sort of program management? So yeah, I suppose how specifically does impact measurement support you in serving women, or would you say that it does or doesn't? I'll just let whoever jumps in. Maybe we can keep all four of us on.
I'll go ahead and start. So I think that, it's both. You mentioned whether is the benefit the ability to report back to your investors or to your donors. Sure it is, that is definitely one of the benefits. And we understand that it enables us to report back, and then the goal being to continue to access capital that, you need to grow your business, right? And your program further. And again, the goal is to make even more positive impact, either within your existing client base or in new geographies. And then, what else is the benefit? Sure, it's also, beneficial to us, right? And the benefit there is, are we really creating the positive outcomes that we care about? And, how do we know if you're not going to measure it, right? So for SPVD, we've had some recent data that sort of validate our work. We had a survey, and the data shows that, are our members saying that we are positively impacting their lives. And we did some work in Samoa and Fiji, actually with Kiva, which was super useful. And it shows that SPVD is in fact having a positive impact on members' quality of life. In Samoa and Fiji, 99% of the respondents said that their quality of life has improved because of SPVD. And 71% said so in Fiji, and 56% in Samoa said it improved very much. So, getting that data that confirms that, okay, we're on the right track. We are having positive impacts on members' lives. They see that. And then they can provide us with the input that says, wow, yes, you guys are making a difference. And I would say sort of another validating insight, because it's another one of the benefits, right, is to validate, whether you're making this impact, is that our loans and services are beneficial to their businesses. And so in Samoa, actually almost 100% of the respondents in Samoa and Fiji said that our loans and services are beneficial to their businesses. And that's huge for us because our goal is to enable our members to start and grow income generating businesses. And so to the extent our products and services support that, that then it validates our work. Now it's not all, perfect. Certainly we have data that shows, how we can improve our products and services to improve outcomes for our members. And this actually includes, flexible repayment options. And so we're looking into a number of different ways we can modify our existing products. Some of the lower hanging fruit, like increasing loan amounts, is something that when we, saw the data and the feedback that came back to us, we did that actually straight away. That was an easy one. The team on the ground in Samoa, for example, realized that, yeah, we've been hearing this. Here's the data to prove it. Let's just make this happen already, and let's help our members grow their business. And so, we do use the data that we gather in ways to improve products and services, support members further. And so, for example, our members really are interested in additional sort of wraparound services or business training. I think we do a good job with financial education training. We have a whole financial education program targeted to our clients. We also do business skills training, but they want more. So, what can that look like? And we're doing a pilot now in Fiji. Hopefully we'll be launching that over the next couple of months to really help our micro entrepreneurs scale to that next SME level. And so the training will include sort of workshops, SME preparation workshops, actually mentoring and some one-on-one training at this point because it is a smaller pilot. And then we'll look at the impact of this program. We actually are looking to create an SME accelerator just to really see, are these additional products and services that we offer our members, will they really propel them to succeed in the SME space? And so data is valuable, it could sit on a shelf if you leave it there. But if you don't, if you sort of take the information and have a discussion around it, and we do that at our executive meetings, then you can really make some changes that will ultimately impact your members or your clients' outcomes.
So the one word I really wrote down during that was validation, and how that goes back up to the chain, because you have to validate what you're doing on the ground, and that also then helps you validate to your donors or investors to continue growing the investment to then create the outcome and the impact. I will let Tara and Antonia come in as well, but just in the back of the head, we might come back to it, which is what happens when the data doesn't validate what you're doing? Do you then look for a new metric, or is it actually saying, or do you look for a new program? That's a slightly different question, and I don't want to throw straight away at everybody, but the peril of corroborating data. So to Tara and Antonia, in terms of how important is impact measurement for you in terms of the scale?
Antonia, would you like to jump in, or would you like me to?
You could go first. That's fine.
Okay. I think again, kind of our particular seat in the ecosystem as an impact first fund manager. I mean, I think in general in impact investing there is an intention around impact. And one of our partners said once, like, I wouldn't dream of managing my business without financial statements. Right, without financial data. How are we thinking that we are managing our businesses without impact data, right? And I think that philanthropy has invested a lot in understanding outcomes, and the cost is high. And unfortunately, I think traditional investing has invested very little to none, right? And I'd say impact investing, we are at a point in maturity as an industry that we need to be taking ourselves seriously enough to be capturing this data. For global partnerships as an impact first fund manager, we would like to see impact first capital, meaning capital that defines the impact and then designs the financial terms around that impact. So clarity on the who, the what, and the why, and then design the terms of your financing, your return expectations, your risk tolerance based on the types of impacts that you're looking to achieve. So for us, impact is front and center. It's central to what we do. And so having a disciplined practice is critical. But what we've learned is that that practice needs to first and foremost create value for the end constituent if it's going to work. Because if we're all truly focused on that end client, then the data that helps drive more value for that end client is going to help drive more value for our social enterprise partners. It's going to help drive more value for global partnerships, and it's going to help drive more value for our investors, right? So I think that this question of understanding client voice and what data the client values and what data helps the social enterprise do better for their clients needs to be front and center in our impact management practices. And I think Polly's done a really nice job talking about what the social enterprise and how the social enterprise might use that data to adapt their products and services, their outreach strategies. And we engage with our partners on that. And I think having data to engage them, not just on who do you intend to serve, but here's what we're learning about the gender profile, the poverty profile, the demographics of your target market. You're at X percentage of poverty outreach now. What are your goals? We're providing you with growth capital. And it's not just growth for growth's sake, check the box, you're serving more clients, or you're serving more marginalized clients, right? And so now as we have data, we can actually engage with our partners in that conversation. And our goal as an impact investor is to be using that data to support our partners so that they can perform more strongly and so that we can direct capital at the organizations, at the social enterprises that are doing that successfully, right? And ideally start to move the market towards valuing that impact in the financial terms that are being provided to those high-performing social enterprises, right? Because as impact investors, if what we're looking to do is truly have an impact return, then we need to value that. And it's very difficult to value that in financial terms if we don't have concrete measurement. And that concrete measurement needs to be accompanied by qualitative, deeper dive work too. You know, when we do surveying work, we answer close-ended questions as well as open-ended questions, because we learn a lot in the open-ended questions about other impacts that we may not know are happening. But I think to be quite honest, from that point, then we say, and how do we inform the asset owners that this is working so that we can get more capital to flow on better terms to the social enterprises that are actually creating the most value? And in this case, and within this thesis, for marginalized female micro entrepreneurs who have a lot of capacity to build economic resilience for themselves and their households.
There's a lot there, and some of it's about how, you know, the conversations then you have up the chain, how much that links with actually what you're looking at down the chain. That bit you were talking before about the clarity of the alignment, how difficult that conversation is. Maybe that's something we could come back to a little bit more. And Antonia, do you want to jump in?
Yes. So the impact that we are trying to achieve is threefold. One, the profitable entrepreneurship opportunities and access to affordable basic necessities. And we've defined our target market as, for example, households that were previously boiling their drinking water to now start consuming Jibu bottled water, or were using charcoal to cook and, you know, converting those to LPG. And then the other impact is meaningful jobs. Yeah. With our unemployment rates, we can take anyone with minimal education, and being a franchise business model, we train them to be able to comply with the brand standard. So the impact is kind of embedded in the business model as we, you know, run the day-to-day operations. Those are the customers that we target. And so when it comes to investors, I mean, that's important. Yeah, impact is important because that's what they're investing for. But for us, as a mixed gender model, by the way, it's not that we are only targeting women. We've seen a strong business case when it comes to women. For example, our business data shows that out of all the franchise agreement terminations that have happened since we started operations, let's say 20, it's been only one female franchisee, the rest are all men, yeah? So this means women don't give us as much trouble. They are better at, following brand standards. They are better at compliance. And also multi-unit ownership. We find that 6 out of 10 multi-unit store owners are women, yeah? And multi-unit means they get the first franchise, and then because they do so well, they get a second one and a third. We have a female franchisee who owns 5. The other 5 own 3 each. And so this is also validation that, women franchisees do a much better job of operating franchises. And so for us, how this has informed our strategy is in our newer markets like Kenya, whereas our network average of women-owned franchises is 40%, that is out of the 150 franchises in 7 countries. In our newer countries like Kenya, 63% of the franchises are women. So we've had to tweak our recruitment, and also our area master franchisee, where we give a license to one partner to franchise in a country. So our newest ones, Burundi and Zambia, they are also owned by women. So we've tweaked some things to get more women in, because we've seen we have a very strong business case when franchises are operated by women. Would want, again, like I said earlier, dig deeper into the more, how it translates to quality of life, but at least from the business perspective, it's working. Women make better franchise owners than men.
Thanks. I'm not going to say anything about the quality of men as franchisees. I used to do quite a bit of work in the mining sector, and a lot of women were starting to be employed in driving the massive rigs, because the men just ignored all the safety checks. They just kicked the tires and went, yeah, that'll do. And you could rely on the women to actually do it. So that kind of the compliance thing there, I thought, was kind of reflected some of the stuff we've seen across different sectors. So there's quite a lot of barriers that have been spoken about. So we've got some that are definitely there, and then there's some that have obviously been overcome. So I think, like, where do you think you've maybe overcome some of those barriers? It'd be quite nice to hear from your individual perspective. And there's a few things that have been like banging around in my head around that translation of the impact on the ground, and then up to, does that equate to sort of portfolio or organizational wide? Because a lot of you've spoken about the nuance, really understanding what it means. That's quite hard to translate when you then try and bunch it all together and take it up the line. I don't know if that's still something that's a problem, but in terms of your own progress regarding impact measurement and management, how have you overcome some of those barriers, and what is still needed addressing? And just before we come to that, Antonia, LPG, liquid petroleum gas, I guess.
Yes.
Gas for replacing charcoal, because okay, indoor fires, etc. Great. Cool. I'll turn over.
I think I'd be curious to hear Polly and Antonia. I think as an industry, to be honest, there's been fear of actually capturing this data. So I think we just need to be honest. To your point, Dan, like, what if the data doesn't tell us what we want it to, right? If nobody's demanding it, and there's a chance that the data is going to come back saying something counter to what I've been communicating or believing about my practices. So I think one challenge that we are overcoming, Dan, or at least we see it in our space, is moving beyond the fear of the data to actually saying, like, this can be useful. And I think part of that is having an orientation towards continuous improvement and learning, iterative practices. When we engage our partners, this isn't a gotcha exercise, right? This is an exercise, and we have an alignment in our intentions. Now let's understand if there's alignment in practices, and learn from you about what is it going to take. If you say you want to reach households, marginalized households living in poverty, and yet only X percentage of your clients are living below the poverty line, what is it that you want to see improve? What would have to change about your practices? What type of capital do you need in order to reach that population more effectively, right? So I think moving away from fear, and part of that is managing expectations in those aligned partnerships, right? And so as an impact first fund manager looking to bring capital toward the most impactful solutions, we feel we have a role to play in kind of demystifying impact data, capturing it and learning from it. And so I think I've seen movement there. I think at first when we started to engage our partners about surveying their end clients, they were a little bit like, we do that. We don't really want to open the door to an investor seeing that because we're afraid that it might lead to you abandoning us as a funder, right? And that's a fair fear, right? But I think that piece of fear has moved. I think that particularly within the microfinance space, given that the industry has been around for a long time and there have been waves of different data that have been captured that have led to either inconclusive or negative indications. I think there's been more pressure to actually be clear on what is being achieved. If it's not income growth, what do we mean by economic resilience and how do we know it when we see it? Because even when the RCTs were coming out and saying that microfinance wasn't working, our practitioners who were closest to the women that they were serving were saying something really important is happening here and it's not being captured in that methodology, right? And so I think that I'm pleased that we're moving away from being afraid of the data. We're moving in the direction, I think, of there being not just an appetite, but actually an expectation of social enterprises and hopefully impact investors that they're going to be dedicating resources, not just financial, but talent resources. And then there's an important question of who's paying for it, right? And I think we've all got to have some skin in the game because this is not priced into the margin in impact investing at this point in time. So everybody within the chain has to understand that there is going to be a spend in order for us to gain this level of clarity or at least confidence around what's being achieved. So more of those conversations are happening around like, how do we syndicate this? If we all are looking for the same type of data, how do we actually collaborate in a way that's going to be effective? How do we align metrics? How do we benchmark, right? Those conversations are happening and that's exciting. Having worked in this space for a long time, I could say 13 years ago that wasn't the conversation we were having.
And before I let Holly and Antonia come in, I think it's interesting just to reflect what you were talking about, that the impact there, it's not valued just in general. I mean, but this is not limited to the impact investing space. This is the whole of business enterprise across the board. Externalities are not captured, whether they're social, whether they're environmental, they're not priced into any of it. Neither is therefore the understanding of that data and the management of it. You've only got to look at what's happening across the climate space to see the difficulties now as everyone's scrambling to understand all their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. I think that's the same kind of thing here. So actually, I think it's quite interesting about what the broader business investment world can understand from impact investing and the lessons that have been learned from that kind of going forward. That's a bit of a sidestep. Polly and Antonia.
Sure. So I guess from our perspective, when we think about impact measurement, impact management, and some of the barriers, but broadly speaking, we look at a number of categories when we think about our impact, and those do include the breadth of our impact, which is our outreach, the depth of our impact, so the degree of financial inclusion, and the usage of our products. And then, of course, there's that member level impact. Are we making an impact on our members' lives? How do we measure that? That, I think, has been the most challenging for us, and I'd venture to say for lots of microfinance or financial inclusion practitioners and organizations. So in terms of the barriers, your question about what if the data doesn't show results? What if the data doesn't show you not only not results, but in something that that's negative? So for us, what's happened is that we have had instruments in the past, questions in particular on instruments where it's very inconclusive, to the point where you're collecting this data and you look at it and you're like, it doesn't say anything, right? So we've spent this time collecting the data and you scratch your head and you're like, all right, well, clearly we're either, we've approached this somewhat, we need to approach this in a different way, right? So our survey instruments have evolved. And also what we found out in terms of some of the barriers were that, our programs were actually using slightly different tools. So they adapted them, right? And so that was for us as a network, it's like, well, wait a minute, we need to be a little bit more consistent and methodical about this and create a tool that can be used across the network. Our program in Fiji actually was able to secure funding, and actually they brought PPI to Fiji. So then they were using a completely different tool to measure impact. So, for us prior to COVID, we decided that we were going to redesign and upgrade our impact management system. And so, the goals were to develop a methodology that was based on best practice research principles, sound methods that can be applied across MFIs, and how, and really thinking about how we bake it into the operations of SPVD so that it's not just this distraction or this one-off, right? So like if we can incorporate it into our operations, then it becomes part of who we are and how we work. And so, we've been looking to create this tool that tracks these changes in our members' quality of life and overcoming some of the shortcomings from our previous measurement tools. So, so some of the barriers too would be, the tools not being sensitive enough to the changes that we're hoping to see, and so how do we redesign a tool that helps us to capture that? How do we, yeah, go ahead.
So on that, and I've got a specific question for Antonio in a minute from the audience, but one of the things that, there's an interesting part about collaboration, because there's obviously we're in business, people are trying to outcompete each other, and then there's this problem of this is what we've got versus the actual need to make it work. Everyone has to kind of really work on the same playing field when it comes to understanding what the impacts are and how they're kind of recorded, understood, and transmitted up the chain. So some of the stuff you talked about there, what is out there? What are the practical things that people have been used to actually understand through either external studies or through your own metrics? Like what as a practical takeaway for people, what do you see out there that is useful?
I'd like to hear Tara's thoughts on this, because in our lead up to this session and some of our discussions, I've been impressed with the way that Global Partnerships has brought their portfolio companies along this journey and is guiding them to aligning their the metrics that they're looking to use. And I've been very curious to ask the question, and I don't want to take away from your question, Dan, but really, how are you doing this? How are you guiding your portfolio companies along this journey? And then to Dan's point, what are some of the tools that you're using that's really enabling the industry potentially in the future to just be more standardized and be able to benchmark across portfolio companies?
Holly, you've tasked me with in 6 minutes. I think generally speaking, I think that there's a lot of good work. We need to come in assuming there's a lot of good work that's been done, at least with the social enterprises that we're engaging with, and that there isn't a silver bullet answer from here's the method that's going to answer all of these challenges, right? So we've taken an approach of kind of building and trying to create value in our partnerships through the business relationship. So this comes down to, how do we underwrite our partners? What data are we asking for? What questions are we engaging in? Which ones are open-ended? Which ones are data? So we come in and we really look to understand not just how many women receive loans, how many women receive education, but what is the content, design, and delivery mechanisms behind your education practices? How do you evolve your educational offering, right? So we really look to understand the practices at the enterprise level, what data they have, outputs, outcomes, and also the context. What gender dynamics have informed your lending policies and practices, your education offering, right? So we try to put the data in context to understand what's happening with the partner. We have historically then said, we also ask, what outcomes are you capturing? How are you capturing them? At what cadence? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What are you learning? How are you using that data? So we look to understand their impact management practices as part of our underwriting, and then say, what are you working on? Like, what data would help you, right? We have recently been, over the past 3 years, using lean data, which I know there'll be a panel on, I believe, tomorrow. There'll be a representative from the 60 decibels team, which is a mobile-based surveying methodology that goes directly to the end client. It is costly, it is expensive, and part of our role, we feel, as an impact-first investor is to help de-risk the methodology for our partners. It's not something we can afford to do with all of our partners. But as a blended capital fund manager, we do have philanthropic resources available because, again, it's not covered in our management fee, for us to be able to follow through with a select set of partners who we believe can really use that data, want that data to answer business questions, have an impact management practices to weave it in, to then go and conduct. So in our Women's Centered Finance with Education initiative, as I mentioned, we have 30 partners. We've done assessments with 9 of them, right? Speaking with over 3,000 clients. And the survey instrument is the same across those 9 different enterprises, right? And it's asking the questions that I mentioned around our outcomes. Are women's roles in their household decision-making changing? Are they having the capacity to plan their finances, save, earn an income? And what are they doing with any increased earnings that they have in terms of spending on their household? And I know that time is tight, so I'll try and wrap this here. But I think what we're finding is then we can sit down with that data with our partners, right? And even partners that don't have a gender mandate, because we look at the data in a disaggregated way. We say like, oh, look, your female clients are reporting something really different than your male clients. That's 40, 50% of your client base that's experiencing challenges that your male clients aren't. And all of a sudden, we don't come in with a mandate on gender and say, you need to do X, Y, and Z as a company in order for us to invest in you, but we're coming and saying, look at what the data is telling you. We care about women. We apply a gender lens to our investment strategy. I mean, Antonia, you've done such a beautiful job articulating your learnings, right? On like, this is really the difference. If we're going to be successful with female franchisees, here's what we need to be doing in our product and service design. And the impacts look different. So maybe it costs a little bit more in that initial outreach, but it's going to deliver more value if we do the work, right? So here's what we need to do, but also here's what we need from you as an investor, right? If you care about this, we need you to help us with more patient capital, right? We need you to help us with lower cost capital because that initial onboarding is more expensive. So when you have the data, the ability to move beyond the intentions and talk about concretely what I need from you as my partner in this, we're having those conversations downstream as well as upstream, right? And I think that there are tools available. They're not perfect. Like, we're not abandoning all of our underwriting and saying to our partners, do away with everything you've done in the past, adopt this. But we're saying, how can we start to test it and use that data effectively?
So we saw a few questions coming in. I'm going to do a very, very, very quick one to Antonia, like 20, 30 seconds, which was around when GEFI was just beginning and fine-tuning its model. Was the impact measurement and management useful, what was being imposed, or did it really kind of slow you down? Was it cumbersome? Just a very quick reflection on that, if you can.
Okay. So female franchisees has always been one of the metrics we've been tracking since we started. But we found that we are not attracting many, and we knew the reasons: lack of, access to capital, experience, and at the time we didn't have the capacity to provide this. Our training was not yet at the level we needed to be. We didn't have the capacity to provide interest-free loans, which we do now. So as we grew as a business, we are able to, for example, we partner with Kiva to provide loans. Our training is so much better, and we've attracted more resources as we've grown. So we are more equipped, to support female franchisees than we were in the beginning. So it is something we've grown into.
It came later on through that bit. Okay, I've done a terrible job of giving time to wrap up and everything that goes with that. When we debrief, we've got some of the other questions which will hopefully be able to feed back to Kiva and feed into the organisers. I think we've kind of talked across quite a few of the different topics that came with it, and there's some insights. I think a couple of things to take away would be actually something we might try and follow up on, which is where some of these learnings of best practice can actually come. That collaboration space that sort of needs to happen so that everybody's speaking in the same way, because there's obviously some barriers about having the same kind of conversations so that we're not jumping around between different metrics all the time. But really coming underneath it was that need for the clarity, but also the problem with this is it needs to recognize the impact. If you really want to understand it, it's got to be built in and it's got to be costed as well, because actually, if you want to do this properly and you want to get the scale, then you have to really understand the impacts, but that creates a cost effect right at the very beginning for that. I'm going over time by a couple of seconds, but I should say thank you to the panelists who've been great and really given some insights into what they're doing. Hopefully through Kiva, we can open up and either get emails to people so they can contact and find out a little bit more. And sorry if we didn't get to all of your questions that came through on the chat on there. I'll hand over to Kelly and the team to boot us out into another room.
Thank you so much, Dan and Tara, Antonia, and Polly for your insightful responses today and really sharing how your organizations work to scale impact measurement and financial resiliency for women. Sitting on Kiva's impact team, I particularly enjoyed the conversation on eliminating the fear of inconclusive or negative data that may come through in impact measurement. Tomorrow, the forum will actually have a session on participatory product design, where we will hear how you can include both the positive and negative voices of end borrowers in the design of better financial products and services. We'll also be having a session looking at the corporate perspective on advancing gender goals, and the forum will start tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific time. I would also like to thank the panelists from our first session today on lessons learned from COVID. Thank you, Laura, Tom, Sana, and Eric. Your insights will undoubtedly be useful as the sector adapts their gender lens investing strategies to best serve women in the current global context. And finally, I'd like to thank our audience members for your participation today in both sessions. We would like to continue this engagement in our informal networking sessions, which will directly follow this. And there you can chat with panelists and other audience members on topics related to gender equity and financial inclusion. We'll include a Zoom link to those networking sessions in the chat box. So feel free to click on that, and we hope to see you all there. Thank you so much.